this as a colonic title. There is a little punctuation mark called a colon. A study was done by psychologists where they took the exact same paper and they had one title being something like this: Effects of caddisfly grazing on stream algae. And they took another paper, the same paper, and they simply changed the title and put a colon in it. Same paper, and they gave it to 100 students to evaluate as to how good the research was, how scholarly it was. What they found is that the paper with a colon in it, in the title, it was the exact same paper. The students thought the average was 10% better research than without the colon. So it was only on the title, the slight difference in the title, they decided that the research was better. Same study, same paper, but 50 had each one of the titles, and the one that was a colon, they said was 10% more scholarly. So again, it emphasizes how a title can affect how people perceive your paper. Okay, now, this is a very, very interesting topic. The topic of authorship of scientific papers, Now, the number of authors on a scientific paper can vary from one to sometimes in physics over 500. The first paper on the human genome, had 53 authors, which is more than the number of chromosomes that we have. So there were 53 authors. Now, the tendency that we see is for articles to have more and more co-authors, because oftentimes research involves people that are specialized in more than one area. But authorship should include only those who actively contribute to the design and execution of the experiments. And this is a good definition of an author. An author is one who takes intellectual responsibility for the research results that are being reported. So in other words, the author is one of the ones that says, I am responsible for this research and can explain this research. So let's talk a little about authorship. There are many areas of contribution that could justify someone being a co-author of a paper. There are many areas. For example, the original idea, the conception of the project, the funding of the project, the design of the experiments, the collection of data, the analysis of data, assistance with manuscript preparation, and probably many, many other examples. For the microbiologist, somebody that provides an enzyme that helps with the experiment, or somebody that provides a piece of equipment that you can use, or for genetics, somebody that gives you the primers, that or develops the primers. But the other side of this is we can almost think of examples where in each one of these cases authorship is not necessary. For example, I may own a piece of equipment, but I let everybody use it. Or maybe the department paid for my piece of equipment. Or I'm just helping you by editing the English of your manuscript. That wouldn't mean I should be a co-author. Or maybe I'm giving you an idea for data analysis. Do a non-parametric test instead of a parametric test. Or maybe I'm going out in the field with you for one day to help you collect data, as we did yesterday. That doesn't mean I should be a co-author. There, unfortunately, is an area in between where perhaps you are a technical helper and you're getting paid for doing some of the research, should you then be a co-author or should you not be a co-author? This is very, very difficult, and it's something that really has to be discussed and worked out. The point I'm trying to make is that clearly there are reasons why somebody should be a co-author, but we could almost take all those reasons and indicate that it would not be necessary to be a co-author. So authorship is something that you really have to discuss. Typically, throughout the world, the authorship is between a student and a professor, because the professor oftentimes gives the student the idea for the research, funding for the research, designs the experiment, may not be involved in data collection, because we all have to attend too many meetings, may assist with data analysis, but maybe is not statistically up to date and can't do that, but almost always does manuscript preparation and many, many other things. Now, let's look at author sequence. First of all, there is the first author. So, for example, if there are, by a single author would be Tanida-san alone, by himself. Or there could be a first author of two. Perhaps he and I collaborate on research. It would be Tanida and Resch. Perhaps there's a series of authors. So it could be Tanida and Resch and Rodney. There could be many authors, and that could go on to 3, 4, 5, up to 100, or 200, or 500, as in physics. Now, in terms of credit for the research, if a person is the sole author, that person gets credit for the research. If there are two authors, both get credit. When it becomes difficult is when there are a series of not 3, or maybe not even 4, but 10 co-authors. Who gets credit for the research? In that case, the credit typically goes to the first author and the last author, because the last author typically represents the laboratory that the research was done in. So, for example, if you saw in today's paper, they have synthesized a living bacterium from non-living material. They used a bacterial membrane to actually synthesize a primitive life form. This is Craig Venter, who was the first to unravel the human genome. This is probably the biggest story in science of the year. It just happened today. Now, the authorship of that because there were several co-authors that will be important and will get the credit, is the first author and the last author, because there's many, many authors that are in between. It's in today's Science, issue of Science. So that's a very, very important idea, that when you have a lot of co-authors, more than 3 or 4 or 5, the authorship, the people that really get the biggest benefit from it are the first author and the last author. The last author representing the laboratory in which the research was being done. The laboratory in which the research was being done. Now, some people have suggested, we should have just an alphabetical listing of authors, that everybody does it in terms of the first letter of their name. And when I was in graduate school, I don't know, this is, maybe you can explain this in Japanese. There was a woman who I was in school with whose name was Yardley, Y-A-R-D-L-E-Y, who, worrying about being the first in the alphabet, because Y is at the end, she changed her name to Ardley, which begins with an A.